Frank West.
Remember that name, because the whole world's gonna know it in 3 days.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about.
Holy shit, guys. Dead Rising is back. I don't care if it's a remake or if TJ Rotolo isn't coming back. I am so freaking happy that finally, after the stain in the pants of Frank West that was Hank East in his Black Friday shopping experience that happened to involve zombies, we're finally getting more Dead Rising content. To celebrate this momentous occasion, I decided that we're going to take a look back at the first game and rank all the Psychopaths. Even if the Dead Rising series as a whole has its flaws, the Psychopaths are widely considered to be one of the biggest highlights from their respective games. From how much of a challenge they could be compared to the usual zombie, to their wacky personalities, many players adore these Psychopaths. Hell, you wonder why the fourth game was so terrible? Well, it's for a number of reasons, but the removal of Psychopaths was definitely one of them. Instead, we got these goofy goobers, or maniacs as the game likes to call them. I think the people who made the game who were maniacs would think this was a suitable replacement. Anyway, I think it's about time we take a look at the Psychopaths from the first game and rank them from worst to best. Before we start, however, I just need to lay down a few ground rules. First, I'm only going to be taking a look at the first game for this video. I want to keep this video relatively short, and hell, someone's already gone as far as to rank every single Psychopath in a single video, and that's a feat I could only hope to achieve. Maybe one day, but today will not be that day. Second, I should also let you know that I'll be using the PC version for this. Not only because it's easier to get footage of, but it's also the version of the game I'm the most familiar with. There's another reason as to why I mentioned this, but I'll explain why later. Third, the way I'll be ranking these Psychopaths are based on a number of factors. How easy are they to fight? Do I like their character? What rewards do they get upon defeating them if it applies? Do they have a theme track that's just a bit more of a banger than the others? All this stuff should give you an idea on what I look for when it comes to what I think makes a great Psychopath. Finally, I should probably explain my criteria. There's 14 encounters you can have with Psychopaths that are not main characters, but the Psychopaths I'll be talking about must have encounters that are at the very least isolated incidents, as in they cannot appear in multiple areas. So I'm not going to be talking about the true eye cults or the special forces. I'm also going to count major character Psychopaths as long as they have a cutscene that introduces them. So that means I'll be talking about Carlito's first two fights and Isabella's fight, but I won't be talking about Carlito's third fight in the tunnel. That leaves us with 15 Psychopath fights to rank from worst to best, and thankfully a video where I don't feel like I have to breeze over anyone. But the question is, who will be the best Psychopath and who will be the worst? Well, we kind of know who's going to be number one, but just pretend it'll be a big surprise. Anyway, let's get started. Yeah, this shouldn't be a surprise. A common sentiment among Dead Rising fans is that Joe is the worst Psychopath of the game, and it's easy to see why. To her credit, or at least I don't know if I should be giving her credit for this, but she's easily the most vile of the Psychopaths, and when your competition is a cult leader and a fucking terrorist, that's impressive. The best way I can describe Joe's Psychopath fight is clunky. She's pretty slow with most of her more devastating attacks, and she's not a hard fight if you know how to dodge her, but because you're fighting in such a small-ass store, you'll more likely get hit with an attack that takes chunks off your health bar. Easily her most devastating attack, however, is her stun gun, which immobiles Frank for several seconds, during which she uses to either make sure you don't have kids, or attack the hostages. Oh yeah, and aside from dealing with Joe, you have to be careful to avoid hitting the hostages, which is pretty hard to do considering that, again, room small. Essentially, fighting Joe is like fighting a bear on top of a tightrope, but instead of falling off, you just saw through Kay's face. It's tense in the worst way possible, and a contender for the most unfun boss fight in the Dead Rising series. Plus, aside from getting some survivors you get, among which I consider to be some of the most dreadful to deal with, the reward you get for beating Joe is a weapon you can literally get in a box. Need I say more? Awful fight, not very good rewards, Joe's at the bottom, no surprise there.
In a situation like this, I can't afford to trust nobody.
I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I personally don't really care for Cletus. For what it's worth, I actually do like the character of Cletus as an overly paranoid gun shop owner, and I think his voice actor is fun, but I think that's the most I could say about him that are positives. One of my issues with him is that, like Joe, he's fought in such a small ass room with barely any good cover, and his shotgun will absolutely wreck you. Plus he has the ability to take a swig and recover health, which is always just absolutely lovely. I think my biggest problem with him is that, in my opinion, there's very little point fighting him. Other psychopaths in the game like Joe before him at least give you the ability to rescue some survivors, and even the story-based psychopaths at the very least have the benefit of, well, advancing the story. Cletus sticks out because the only thing he really does is just give player points. Sure, you could say defeating him gives you access to the gun shop, which is helpful when dealing with the convicts, but later on, the gun shop survivors will show up and pretty much get rid of him, and the best weapon to use against the convicts, the shotgun, literally spawns early on in the entrance plaza. So there's very little point in dealing with an extremely frustrating psychopath. Also, yes, I am aware of chop till you drop saving him, but that's a different version of the game, and I'm not counting it. He's a nightmare to deal with psychopath that I feel doesn't offer enough in terms of going out of your way to fight.
But Daddy, he ain't no zombie. He's just a man.
Thomas! We're doing this to survive. You know that.
Hey, remember when I said there was finally a video where I didn't have to breeze over anyone? I lied. The Hall family are pushovers, plain and simple. Unlike Joe and Cleus, who are pains in the asses in their own special way, the Hall family are so piss easy that it's almost pathetic. All you have to do is chase them down and kill them. That's it. The arena doesn't hit you in any way, they go down super easily, they don't have any special attacks, you don't even really need to worry about dying, as apparently they've replaced their bullets with peas. You will not die to these guys unless you absolutely blow chunks at the game. Not only that, but there's a similar psychopath that happens earlier in the game, and it's miles better than this one. I also feel they're kind of incomplete. Like, we know that Roger and Jack can't be reasoned with, but I feel Thomas could have had something. I would be okay with him being able to be recruited if you got the opportunity to talk with him and ask his family to stand down. As is, however, the Hall family exists to make getting Wayne, Jolie, Rachel, and Floyd to the safe room a cakewalk. The first two Dead Rising games have had these missions that I like to call escalation missions, where you encounter a survivor, but they don't immediately join even after you complete the mission. They're often quite annoying because they require such specific needs that you'll need to think to yourself, why the hell am I helping you? Kent is one of the first of these you'll encounter on day one, and as such, he's pretty much the first non-story mode psychopath you're likely to encounter. Not fight, encounter. Remember that. In order to fight Kent, first you have to do is two missions. The first one is not that hard, as it's mainly just a tutorial on how to work the camera, but the second one, oh boy, it can be annoying. On paper, his second mission isn't that hard, as all you need to do is take an erotica photo for him, but the problem is that it's never hinted at that he wants this. Seriously, I've played the game time and time again, and there's never been a hint that he would want this until you interact with him. By then it's too late, and you fail. But let's say you did pass this mission, however. Well, after being put on a list and making Jeremy here cream himself, he decides for one final showdown. And this is where we discover that Kent actually has two different psychopath fights. The first one happens when you get there in time to save Tad. He's easy as hell, mainly does his regular attacks, and the same can even be applied to his alternate fight. Somewhat. His alternate fight only happens if you don't go to Kent immediately, like 30 seconds immediately. He kills Tad, strips you of all your weapons as well as your clothes, and also chains you to the ceiling? Are we sure Kent's not a YouTuber on the sideline? This fight is far more tricky because now you have to fight him with your hands and wherever else you can get your hands on, which isn't really much. Honestly, the main reason he's this low is because I don't really like the missions that lead up to it. That second mission could go and chain itself to the roof, which, considering Kent, he'd probably love.
This loser. Get your aim right, brother. Yeah.
Hey, remember when I said earlier there was a third reason as to why I mentioned I was using the PC version? Well, here's the reason. The convicts appear on the first day and make one hell of an introduction. Frank's walking along, minding his own business, probably just dealing with Aaron being a real pain in the ass, when suddenly, here come three convicts driving a jeep with a machine gun mounted to it, nearly taking Frank's head off with a baseball bat. Before you can think to yourself how the fuck did they get in here, like seriously, how do they do it? They see two other survivors and then chase them down, bare swinging the back of this guy's head. And once the cutscene ends, you think to yourself that these guys may not be so bad, the iconic theme starts up, and you know shit has just gotten real. The convicts to many Dead Rising players is one of the most notorious psychopaths in the game. They're likely to spawn at a downright awful time of the game, as you're in the midst of escorting survivors, and considering what we just saw, it's easy to presume that the convicts can and will target them as well. Add on to the fact that they have a car and a goddamn machine gun, as well as the fact that they respawn, which is something that no other psychopath does, and you're left with one of the most dreaded psychopaths in the game. So why are they not in the top 10? Well, here's the thing. In the original Xbox 360 version, much of the dread from these guys came from the fact that you were playing with tank controls when it came to shooting, and considering they could fire the machine gun faster than you could rotate to face them, and they were nightmares to deal with. In the PC version, however, not only do you get the benefit of aiming with a mouse making things way better, but the convicts are legit broken. Seriously, they are just completely scuffed. I don't think I've ever seen a PC port neuter a boss fight in any game so hard. Most of the time, I'll just see them standing there, menacingly, before I remember they're no threat at all. Hell, there's so little of a threat that it's actually possible to just casually walk around them. Plus, remember when I said that they respawn? Well, once you unlock the bathroom shortcut, their threat level pretty much drops to almost zero. You'll never really have the need to bring survivors outside once the shortcut is unlocked, and they become a borderline non-factor as a result. Really what brings them up over the other psychopaths I mentioned is their theme, which is still the best in the game in my opinion, their car, which can be really useful when going for zombie genocide, and occasionally their collective brain cells can work together and remember they're supposed to be a threat, but the downfall is just too great to ignore. So here's our first story-based psychopath fight in Isabella, and this fight is personally the one I'm the most neutral on. You fire on the second day after Jessie calls about seeing her on the monitors heading into the supermarket, likely to clean up register 6. After getting there, she gets on a motorcycle she just has for some reason, and tries to run Frank down. Motorcycle fights are also pretty common in each Dead Rising game, except for the 4th one, but we don't count that one. And I feel like they're kinda mixed bags in my opinion. I think it's because both Dead Rising 2 and Off the Record had both bike fights piss easy because they could get stuck on fences a lot, so I never really found them that difficult, even though they're more than carried by the psychopaths themselves. Isabella's fight, I don't know if I say is one of the better ones or one of the worst ones. On one hand, she manages to avoid what Chuck and Leon end up doing and get stuck on stuff, so she's far more of a threat than them in my opinion. On the other hand, I feel like she's one of the more uninteresting fights when compared to Leon, Chuck, and even Hunter, Theo, Boruto? This guy. I don't hate Isabella by any means, in fact, I think she's pretty good, and the best thing this fight gives is the motorcycle, which is an absolute help later in the game, but I don't know, this fight is just fine, nothing really that special. Well, this is surprising. The final boss of the game is only number 9? I wonder why that is. Well, it's because Brock has always been kind of an odd psychopath for me, mainly because of the way his battle plays out. Unlike most psychopaths in the game, Brock's fight has 2 stages to it. The first stage is where you take control of Isabella and shoot at these lights on the tank while simultaneously shooting down its attacks. It's a very long, drawn-out segment that gets really boring by the time you beat it, and it's the main reason as to why Brock is this low down on the list. In fact, if we're separating these 2 stages, I'm putting the tank fight below Joe because it's that boring. Joe is many things, but hey, at least she isn't boring. After that, however, is his actual psychopath fight, which is way better in my opinion. After your car ring crashes, not only has your health shot back to full no matter if you left in a worse off state, but you have absolutely no weapons, so I hope you know how to fight hand to hand. Brock can be a pretty tricky opponent if you have no idea how to fight hand to hand, and as such, he's more likely to wipe the floor with you, or kick you into the zombies because that will happen a lot, and once you die, which will happen, don't pretend you're going to solo him the first time around, you're going all the way back to the start, and have to do the slow, boring, not very good tank fight all over again. How fun. I'm also not gonna lie, and this may be a bit of a hot take, but I don't think Brock is that interesting. Yes, I know he's a dark reflection of Frank, as they were both involved in wars, and Frank wants to expose the outbreak while Brock wants to cover it up as he's the guy behind the Santa Cabeza massacre. But to be honest, because Brock is introduced so late into the game and outside this one cutscene where it's revealed he browses r/fuck humanity, I just don't really find that fascinating of a character. It also doesn't help that there's just an infinitely better version of him in the second game in my opinion, mainly because we actually get to know him. But yeah, Brock's just an overall fine psychopath. He gets points because his actual fight is pretty unique, but between the dreadful tank fight and him being like,
I hate humanity because they took all the sour cream and onion Pringles, so I'm gonna commit mass murder.
he kinda has to be here for me. Here we are, the first Psychopath fight of the game, and it's interesting that the first Psychopath battle is with the main antagonist of the game. You think that for a first fight you fight someone who's not really that important of the grand scheme of things, but no, the first fight is with the main villain. He's pretty much the first mission in the game after you get into the safe room, and when you get to him, he's firing down at Brad and Frank with a submachine gun, notably not the one you can pick up because Carlito gets special treatment apparently. There's two ways of fighting him. The first way is what I call the bitch way, where you just take pot shots at him and try to whittle down his health. And then there's the way I do it and I call it the cool way, where you just bum rush him and beat him with a mannequin torso. The first Carlito fight is, in my opinion, the perfect way to introduce psychopaths to a player. As I mentioned earlier, psychopaths are great because they provide such a drastically different challenge to the player other than zombies, and Carlito's first fight is a great way to introduce them. He's not the hardest fight in the game, but because you're being thrown to the action so early and without proper time to prepare, there's a pretty reasonable chance he'll kill you. But yeah, I actually quite like this fight. I don't think it's as good as his second fight, mainly because it's a pretty easy fight if you know what you're doing, but it's a very well placed fight that introduces you to what's to come.
Getting closer, I'll light this place up. I suppose you came here to laugh at me too.
The last time I talked about Paul, it was as a survivor, but now I have to talk about him as a psychopath. Paul's always been kind of a weird psychopath for me. It's not because I dislike him, or because I think he looks like Ozzy Osbourne, the guy from Hatred Had a Love Child, or even because it turned out his voice actor is an even bigger psychopath than he is, but it's just that the best way I can describe Paul is not bad. Paul's introduced threatening the most basic-ass survivors in the game, accusing them of laughing at him and threatening to light them on fire with a Molotov cocktail. You know what? I'd probably laugh at him too with face animations like that. The fight itself is not hard, to be honest. It's kind of like the Hall family fight where the psychopath just runs away from you, but unlike the Hall family who mainly just slouch away, Paul full-on sprints away. Not only that, he throws pipe bombs behind him as you chase him down, chucks Molotovs at you, and apparently uses remote-controlled cars that blow you up. But I've never seen them because I'll have the small chainsaw out and kill him before he can leave the store. Hell, he's that little of an issue that I tend to bring the gun store survivors to him, and they have a pretty easy time with him. That being said, the biggest positive I could give to him is simply the fact he is savable. Savable psychopaths have actually always been present in Dead Rising games, save for the fourth one, but we don't talk about it because it doesn't exist. And Paul is the first of these. After you defeat Paul, he ends up lighting his crotch on fire, and after you decide to take a picture of his balls on fire, you have to put him out. Admittedly, this part can kind of be of a pain because you'll never really know if you're actually putting him out, and the fact that your first instinct is to aim with it will just throw it at his nutsack. But the fact that there's multiple fire extinguishers around you and all you need to see is the foam on his crotch to see it is a bit less of a hassle. Really all you need to do is heal him up a bit because Jesus Christ, that's half his health, and you'd be okay. But anyways, as a psychopath, Paul is just... he's okay. I said earlier of the Hall family that there was a similar psychopath fight that I think is miles better than them. And would you look at that? It takes place in the exact same place as their fight! Carlito's second fight starts with the second day, where after Carlito kidnaps the professor and dangles him over some zombies for some reason, it's up to best friends Frank and Brad to save the day. This time Carlito's armed with a sniper rifle, and he's clearly taking some lessons from Cleus because man, his sniper rifle hits like a truck. So bum rushing him is about as smart of an idea as having a CEO determine who gets eliminated in the Hell's Kitchen finale. In fact, while recording footage for this, I died to him twice just because this fight was really that difficult. Thankfully you can cheese it by hiding behind this pillar and taking pot shots at him with a hockey stick, which will make the fight go a lot smoother. But yeah, Carlito's second fight is a far better boss fight than someone like the Hall family. 3 bozos with sniper rifles and it can't be a bigger threat than one guy? What a shame.
Trust me, I'm a butcher. I've got the best meat in town.
I'm not gonna lie, for the longest time Larry was probably the hardest psychopath to rank. I know I've said it plenty of times that some psychopaths are hard to rank, but I'm being serious about Larry. The reason is because compared to a lot of the other story mode psychopaths, Larry is the one that feels the most out of place. Unlike psychopaths in future games that are related to the story, or even one psychopath that I'll talk about later, Larry has no immediate connection to the overarching plot. That being said, there's quite a bit about Larry to discuss. Larry's actually the last psychopath fight in the game aside from Brock in Overtime, and he's first seen taking the injured Carlito to the meat processing area. Once you get there, you see, this. Yeah, Larry's design is one I'm pretty mixed on. On one hand, it's definitely intimidating, with his massive size, dirty clothes, and downright ugly mug, but on the other hand, you know what, maybe it's for the best for the remaster change to look less like a stereotype. Aside from that, Larry's a genuinely frightening looking person the first time you encounter him, but I think the scariest part about him is that it's not exactly clear just how sane he is. He's only ever seen halfway through day 3, by this point you will have already gotten Carlito's bombs out of the tunnels, so that implies he's been down there in the meat processing area since the start of the game. Did he go there for safety, get trapped by the zombies, or did he go there out of his own volition so he could indulge in growling up people? The lack of a clear motive as to why he's acting this way is honestly what makes him a pretty chilling psychopath. I also think his fight is pretty good. You have to kill him before Carlito gets ground into chunks, but Carlito moves so slow that you'll never really have to worry about that. Fight-wise, Larry has the ability to shoulder check you, slice you with his meat cleaver, throw his meat at you, and practice camping in Dead by Daylight by hanging Frank on a meat hook. One other interesting thing to know about him is that he won't immediately attack you. Instead, he'll just stand there for a bit and you have to be the one to make the move. There's a lot of little whistles and buttons to this fight that makes me enjoy Larry more and more. All of this is wrapped up by his voice actor, who I feel is definitely one of the better ones in the original game. Contrasting this terrifying looking guy in a dingy, almost Silent Hill looking room, Michael Yano delivers a very jovial performance for Larry, which I think makes him even creepier. By the way, rest in peace Michael Yama, you were fantastic. Larry's a psychopath that I enjoy more and more to this day. From how creepy he is, to the fight, to the implications of him, he's pretty damn good. Not to the extent of other psychopaths I'm about to mention simply because I have a lot more of a history of them, but Larry's still pretty damn good.
I don't allow vandalism in my store!
And here we are, the best of the story's specific psychopaths in Steven Chapman. You find Steven after going to get medicine for Brad, and from his introduction cutscene alone, you can tell you're going to deal with quite an interesting psychopath. He believes that Frank is here to quote-unquote vandalize his store, which considering the usual crap that retail workers have to deal with, I'm surprised he hasn't broken before the outbreak. The fight with Steven isn't really that hard. Hell, to be honest, you'll find the shopping cart more than Steven. The most Steven himself could do, aside from using that shopping cart as the best shield in a zombie game, is to shoot you with a shotgun. And he's no Cleus or even Carlito for that matter in terms of damage output. Really all you need to do is just get behind him and go to town on him. Plus his weapon I'd say is one of the weaker ones in the game, just because you need to pick it up to bring it out of the store, and I only use it to get to Tanya and Ross faster. However, the main thing that brings Steven up for me is just the voice acting. He's honestly the funniest psychopath in the game. From the first words he says to Frank, to him not allowing vandalism in his store, to him requesting his body to be cleaned up as he dies, to, damn it, why did his voice actor have to change for the remake? Just, I love the fact the remake exists, but it doesn't hit nearly as hard. But yeah, in spite of his psychopath fight not being my favorite, in fact, I say it's one of the easier fights in the game, it's the performance that propels Steven into my top 4.
Now I shall return your tainted blood to the foul earth that has spawned you.
Hey, remember what I said earlier about those escalation missions? Well, it turns out that Kent isn't the only psychopath in the game that has one. Sean's much like Kent in that he's not immediately fought, but unlike Kent, his introduction is way cooler. He's seen making a big old speech about purging the tainted blood of non-believers, and is about to kill Jennifer Gorman until he sees Frank being a good old-fashioned voyeur and declares him as a heretic. This cutscene is admittedly more of an introduction to his cult, and I'm just gonna say this right now, it's the main reason as to why he's in my top 3. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about the true eye cult of this video, but these two are pretty much linked at the hip more than Brock and the Special Forces are, so I think it's fine here. The cult themselves are a pretty consistent threat throughout the game. They're not too hard to defeat themselves, but they can use many tactics like charge you with a knife, suicide bombing, and worst of all, pocket sand. Which just results in you being stripped naked and put in a box. Okay, what's it with you two and stripping people of their clothes before putting them in some weird predicament? Anyway, you later fight Sean in Colby's movie land. Most likely it's going to be the only time you go there. And admittedly, outside of Sean moving faster, he's not too hard of a fight. He doesn't really have any moves that are just truly spectacular, and really the most praise I could give this fight is the fact it's essentially a better version of Joe's fight. His death scene's pretty good though, and it's fitting because he's running the True Eye Cult. Eh? Oh, shut up. Not only that, you get a cool ass sword and some survivors that you have to escort out of the theater and through Paradise Plaza while zombies are swarming the place. They just so happen to be some of the more irritating survivors to deal with because if you don't have queens, you're essentially fucked and. Yeah, as much as the fight of Sean is a bit of a disappointment similar to Steven, there's one thing that brings him up for me, and yeah, it's just the concept. I've always had a fondness for cult villains, and Sean is in my opinion one of the cooler ones. Hell, I kind of wish there was more of him because I just think he's really cool as hell. While his boss fight is not exactly phenomenal and you have to deal with the survivors that come after, Sean's concept alone, as well as the cult he has, is downright amazing, and is what pushes him into the top 3 for me.
You can't tell me, can you, fella? Oh yeah, I know why. It's because you're Viet Cong.
Like the number 1 pick, which should be obvious by now, Cliff is one of the more well-known psychopaths of the game, and it's not just because he's voiced by Steven Bloom, aka objectively the coolest sounding voice actor. Fight me on this and lose. He immediately makes one hell of an impression before he even appears physically. Frank walks into Chris Lift's home saloon seeing a bunch of decapitated bodies hanging from the ceiling, and once Cliff appears, you realize why this is the case. It's revealed that Cliff is a Vietnam veteran in the midst of a war flashback, and believes that Frank is a member of the Viet Cong. Because when I look at this guy, I think Viet Cong. The fight with Cliff is pretty solid actually. He immediately starts out by backstabbing you unless you can make far enough distance, and his main method of attack is using his machete to do some pretty solid damage. He'll also hide on top of the shelves and throw either rope flares to immobilize Frank with a coughing fit, or throw pipe bombs. Perhaps the most noble thing he does, however, isn't an attack, but after he hits you, he'll run to a trapdoor to make a quick escape. Overall, pretty damn good fight. What really puts him up high, however, is his defeat cutscene, where he explains that he went mad after his granddaughter was torn apart by zombies, and it's a pretty sad scene, enough to elicit some sympathy. It's a good reminder that a lot of these people, as heavy and goofy as they are, they're still regular people who are driven into madness by the horrors of the outbreak. Also, his rewards are pretty good too. You get his machete and some survivors to rescue that really aren't that bad. Overall, Cliff's a great psychopath who doesn't really have anything wrong with him. That being said, we all know who's coming next.
Stay away from there, Gramps!
Yeah, this shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, for fuck's sake, I said it myself, this was coming from a mile away. Anyone who's played the game at all knew who was going to be number 1. And for those who haven't and wonder why he's number 1, first off, why are you watching this? Go play the game, you silly goose. Second, let me explain what makes Adam such an elite psychopath. Adam, I'd say, is the first real psychopath you fight. While you do encounter Carlito early on and have the option of going after your way to fight Cletus and the convicts, Adam's pretty much going to be the first legit psychopath you're gonna have to fight. And I couldn't think of a better option. His introduction cutscene alone is just a perfect representation of how the psychopaths are in general. They're clearly kooky and deranged, but when you look closer at them, you can see some additional tidbits. For example, the fact that Adam's state is downright tragic. It's hinted at in his cutscene that he genuinely loved his job as a clown, but after seeing his audience get torn apart by zombies, some of which are even implied to be children, he went off the deep end and started up the coaster in an effort to keep everyone safe. All of this is portrayed perfectly by his voice actor, John Cassier, who himself is perfectly casted as he's also best known for being the fucking Crypt Keeper. As for a boss himself, Adam's someone I struggle with on occasion. He's a very versatile psychopath, like him blowing up heat-seeking balloons full of gas and throwing knives at far distances, to swiping at you with his chainsaws to juggle you and breathing fire as a counterattack, to barrel roll to close the distance or just to flex on you, to having hops that would make your average NBA player weep in jealousy, to even blocking your attacks. Man's prepared for everything. Granted, you could easily cheese him by hitting him with a mannequin torso and back it up every so often, and doing so will not reward you with a death scene that is super brutal, but it will also give you the small chainsaw, and after scoring Greg, the bathroom shortcut! From the rewards you get for beating him, to the fun fight, to the banger soundtrack, to the backstory, to Adam himself, he's pretty much the most perfect psychopath in the Dead Rising series, and my number 1 pick on the best Dead Rising 1 psychopaths. And there we go, 15 psychopaths from Dead Rising ranked. Keep in mind that this isn't exactly a set list, as a lot of my thoughts on the psychopaths may change from time to time. This list is more or less just a general idea on how I rank them, and even then, a lot of them can either get better or worse the more I think about them. Adam and Cliff are still going to be my top 2 though, no question about that. Anyway, that'll be it for me. If you like this video and want to see more like this, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. EternalOpossum out.